Hi, I'm Gianluca Fiorelli and welcome back to the third session. Today we are going to have one of the, most vocal SEO right now and for quite a long time. He's a very genuine voice, very open, very transparent and honest. And he's living in the UK. He's a man, sincerely, I don't know how can he do all the things he does. He has substantially two business companies. One specialized in technical SEO audit, and also because I think it was maybe not the first one, because I remember Martin McDonald already testing something like this, but surely the one of it established the kind of tool the tool is. Maybe you're going to recognize what I'm talking about is SEOstack.io, and a tool that is substantially making Search Console the tool that should be. So after him, many we assisted so many, especially extension, which is not really the same thing, but trying to serve the same. This person is Daniel Foley Carter. Hi, Daniel. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Dealing with the heat of Valencia, but I know that the heat is also there in the UK.
Yeah, it's been 30, 32, 33, which is crazy considering it's still spring. But
Yeah.
as with us SEOs, whether it's hot outside or not, being stuck inside in front of a computer when the weather's beautiful is one of the sacrifices that we make for our industry.
Yes, I know. Well, sometimes if you have air conditioning, it's a good sacrifice not to stay under the burning sun outside. So let me start with as a first question, the classic question I ask to all my guests. How SEO is treating you lately?
Do you mean how is SEO treating me in regards to impact of the stuff that is happening? Or do you mean impact on work because AI's come along, or both?
So essentially, it's an open question. I mean, how it is impacting you as a professional. So with the impact of AI on the work you are doing, and I know,
Yeah,
for instance, that in SEO Stack you have introduced a lot of AI in order to make the tool even better, but
yeah.
also how it's impacting you client side. So the perception that you have seen now that we have almost more than 1 year of introduction, for instance, of AIO in the mainstream. We have collecting data so we can say there was some kind of reaction at first, and now the reaction has changed to these kind of things. So from the client side.
Um, so it's been okay. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is just a slowdown in new business inquiries. For many years, the amount of work that came in couldn't keep up with it, couldn't keep up with SEO inquiries and audit bookings. But in the last year, I've definitely seen things slow down. And I'm not the only one. I speak to quite a few agency owners who have said that they've experienced a slowdown in new business, and some have even seen client losses because, you know, businesses are facing a lot of pressure at the minute because of global economics, global uncertainty. So a lot of businesses are trying to cut spend, and at the same time, AI is coming along, and there's so much hype around it being able to do everything. So I think what's happening is that the SEO industry is suffering in some degree from the client side of things. It makes sense that businesses that are or were investing more heavily in SEO are maybe reconsidering. And I think some of that is down to clients just not wanting to spend the same amount on SEO anymore, or diverting money into paid. I also think a lot of clients are all thinking, AI is going to displace Google. Therefore, we want to be found in LLMs. And I think that's spurring on the SEO industry to be more AI, SEO, geo. And then I think there's that. And I also think there's the fact that some businesses are probably trying to take it in-house because they think, well, AI can do it for us. We don't need to be an SEO or a specialist. And then the last part of it is obviously if it's not the client side of things that's really being impacted by global economics and AI, is SEOs are on the other side where Google is systematically boosting the opportunity to generate a click. We can see clearly that what their motive really is to keep people in search as much as possible. I think this stuff compounding together is making it hard for a lot of SEO freelancers, SEO agencies. So it is an uphill struggle. And without going too long into it, I think the other thing as well is that agencies and freelancers are under a great deal of pressure because, they might be doing a really good job, producing high quality content, getting good links, have a really good solid SEO campaign and strategy. And because Google's taking those clicks away, the good work doesn't translate into the same thing that it used to. And I think anyone that's worked in SEO long enough will understand that a client will just see a downward line. They don't necessarily try and understand the mechanics of it. If they see a downward line and they're spending money every month, naturally they're going to be more inclined to cut budget or stop spending altogether. So I really do feel for the industry. We've never seen anything like this, not to this degree, and not from both sides. So that's how I see it at the minute.
Yes, if this is true, sad news is that this is not something that is going to be reverted for obvious reason, both economically on the side of the players like Google, like the same being, like the new ones, like OpenAI, Perplexity, even Claude, that is a different kind of beast. And you are right saying we never see something like this before, of this scale, but we saw things like this somehow. And maybe it's here where the SEO, let's say, industry or community or practitioner should not make the same mistake they did maybe in the past for other things. So in this case, it's not allowing people who don't know anything, but anything, just a few things about how even AI search works to steal what is their knowledge, the knowledge of SEO. That's why, sincerely, for instance, in my case, am declaring myself as an SEO. But obviously, I also started, as everybody may understand and may know, publishing a lot, almost obsessively about AI search, even if sometimes I touch the connection between classic search and AI search. Because AI search is going to be search at the end of the day. We are living in an interim moment where the two things are still mixing. And in doing so, at least in my case, I was able to maintain a correct amount. Okay, I'm a different condition. I'm not an agency, I'm a consultant, but I'm maintaining a certain grade of leads coming. Not all of them obviously successfully concluding as a lead, but at least maintaining the same pace. And I think that this is maybe instead of, okay, starting again and again and again, like in a flywheel, as we were, the little animal, I don't know the name in English, but it's always running in the, and discussing about the naming of the things. Let's start discussing about how to do the website feasible in the correct way in every service of search. So maybe this is the shift, and talking more about how to give solution to this potential clients is businesses, because we are probably going to see that, okay, I can invest more in PPC, but PPC is still going to give me, okay, how much I have to pay for a click that maybe is not going to convert into a revenue for me. So CPC are boosting like crazy. So you're right talking about website losing traffic, which is true, especially in the information and publisher industry. But still, there are other types of verticals that are still working well. For instance, e-commerce is still working well because it's not just search, it's also merchant.
Yeah.
And so it's also in the future agentic search. So there are industries that probably are not going to suffer that much. Other yes. No, but talking about AI search and classic search, what is your opinion about AI search? Let's say talking about specifically about Google. So AI overview and AI. What are the things that you see that a good SEO is still valuable for these two type of surface? And what else instead you, with the passing of the mouse, and seeing that, okay, usually I wouldn't do it with for classic SEO, classic visibility, but it seems that it's working for being more visible in AI or AI.
I've been doing a lot of testing, so I've been sort of learning about AI modes. I've been learning about Gemini's integration into search. I sort of followed it from day one with SGE before they rebranded it into AI overviews. So I've got quite a lot of theories around this stuff. I think there's a couple of things happening at the minute. I think that Google is trying to not allow other LLMs to take market share. So we know that when ChatGPT came along, Google was like a horse that bolted out the door completely in a mess, because I think the first iteration of their AI, if I remember correctly, was Baird, however you pronounce it. Then because ChatGPT came along and there was a fanfare about AI, Google was slightly late to the party. So they rushed out their integration of AI. And as I can remember from SGE, it was grossly inaccurate. It was generating dangerous information in many cases. It was just a complete mess. But I think Google, being the size that they are, because they've got such a large ecosystem with Android, YouTube, it didn't take them long to catch up in regards to the AI race. But I think now they're at a juncture between what do we look at for traditional search for the future? Because traditional search has only existed so long, primarily because for Google, traditional search and paid search went hand in hand. It's how they built their revenue model. But I think a lot of it is down to adoption now. And I think that traditional search will persist for some time, because everyone knows that, you want to find something, you Google it. But I think we're heading is that, like with any automation, performing a search on Google is still a very manual, laborsome process, because you do a search in Google, you go to one site, go to another site, and you're spending time going through sites and browsing. And if we look at shifting behaviors, the world is changing. So one really good example of this is that short form content absolutely exploded. So for years and years and years, we had YouTube, then we had Instagram Reels, and then we had TikTok, and TikTok absolutely exploded because it almost felt like, as society has evolved, people have got less time to do each specific thing. So people consume content a lot faster, scrolling through TikTok videos. So we know that after TikTok was so successful because their algorithm and because of short form content, Then YouTube released YouTube Shorts. So what that says is that there is a generational shift going on in how people consume content and how people access content. And I think the problem with traditional search is that, it's 30 years old now. We had search engines back in 1995, 1996, basic search. The principle of search engines hasn't really changed. It's just you're being served an archive of sites to pick through. And I think moving forwards, Google is obviously aware of this, but I think they're caught in a trap because they can't drop traditional search. I don't think they've yet figured out how they're going to do AI mode with ads and how that's going to work. So I think they're running these searches. They're running two different things in parallel: traditional search, conversational search. But I think what's going to happen over time is that the decline of the organic click is by purpose, because we know that Google gets more data by keeping people in its ecosystem. So I think with traditional search, a lot of the ranking factors that sit behind that are still the fuel for Gemini, for inclusion in AI overviews. And part of me wants to believe what Google said in one of their most recent webmaster posts, where they basically were saying, you don't need to do this for geo. A lot of what SEO is already what we use. And I actually believe them for once. I didn't believe Google for many years because, when I figured out that they were using user behavior as a ranking factor, I remember this clearly. For years and years and years, people said that I was a conspiracy theorist, and people would say to me, yeah, but what happens if you haven't got GSC or GA4 enabled? How can Google get the data? And I just used to say to people, Chrome. Yeah. And I knew that they were using telemetry data, and it all came about from RankBrain. So when they launched RankBrain, they used Chrome data, because at the same time they were doing RankBrain, they were also doing mobile first indexing, and transpired that Google was using Chrome on people's machines to do the rendering and sending that back to Google, so that Google didn't have the insane processing costs. So I lost all trust in Google when they were telling everyone that they weren't doing something and they were. Then they finally got caught out in the DOJ trial, and then it transpired that actually they do use the data. But I think with Gemini, this is a bit different because they've basically hoovered up the web already. They've trained Gemini on the web. So part of me feels like, what else is there that Google actually needs now? Because you think about it, there was always that fair exchange of a click for many, many years. For every page crawled or 2 pages crawled, I forget the ratios off the top of my head. I think it was like 2-1 or something like that. But Google needed the web. It needed content. And, they trained because they actually started the development of Gemini a long time ago. I think it was DeepMind. So the whole AI thing, they've been building it for many, many years. But if we actually look at Google now, does it need our sites the same way that it did? And I don't think it does. So when it comes to things like AI overviews and AI mode, I don't think that they need to look beyond traditional things. And I think the biggest thing for them is trust. And we all know that comes back to links and brand mentions and brand citations, and then any aggregated behavioral data over time. I think, I was testing AI overviews so much, and, it just kept coming back to links. I tested a lot of things. So anyone that knows me knows that, I spent years ranking like SEO agency, SEO services, SEO consultant, SEO audits. And the way that I ranked is I tested everything. And with AI overviews, it just kept coming back to links. And I even tested, I have a couple of test domains, and I even tested injecting false or wrong information in, and it didn't stop it being cited in AI overviews, even though the information was wrong. So I do feel that for anyone thinking of a strategy moving forwards, I think AI mode and AI overviews are still going to heavily hinge on trust, because you know it, I know it. It's easy now to go out and generate 1,000-page site with programmatic content, but it's a lot harder to gain trust. And that's the one thing that Google has that can segment out garbage sites doing programmatic content generation versus a genuine brand, which is hard to build.
Yes, you're totally right. Before asking you a question about the value of backlinks and eventually also about your money in your life and the E8 in general, I want to ask you something that was popping up in my mind before when you were talking, especially with not only with your clients, but also especially with SEO stack. You have substantially, you can anonymize everything, but you have substantially access to tons of information about how Google Search Console is measuring stuff. And I always had this idea, this convention, but obviously very hard from a small set of search control properties that I have access to. But for instance, in AI overview, especially in AI overview, we know that there are formally, now less, but formally three types of links. One is the classic icon. So this classic citation link on the bar, especially also if you purposely click on the citation. Then there is the gray link, which is sending, it's a zero-click feature, which is sending to another search of Google. And then more and more I see the classic blue link. And I had this theory because I saw it confirmed by a couple of clients of mine that actually it's true that people that maybe are not going to scroll as they were before, scrolling before because there is an AI overview. But if inside the AI overview there is a classic blue link, the classic behavior of clicking on a blue link is still there. Because I saw, especially for certain type of pages that constantly are linked with the blue link in AI overview, that they were losing part of a classic CTR for a position 1 or position 2, but not so much as if they were just linked like with a citation link, one of the icon. Did you see something similar in all the data that you have the possibility to see?
To a degree, yes. But the biggest issue that we've had, obviously, GSC, annoyingly, and this really frustrates me with Google because they are deliberately withholding this information because they don't segment it out as a search appearance item, which they should. And they can, they just choose not to because they told the SEO community, oh, AI overviews drive more clicks. They don't. Absolutely, they don't. And what I've seen with, because the thing is that you can't actually segment GSC data in any way to get anything meaningful. The only thing that we can say is that overall CTR has fallen significantly for position 1, position 2, and the depth of click now is, I think, the last time we did a check. So at the minute, to make this clear, like SEO Stack, all client data, we can't see client data. We have a very strict policy on data protection and things like that. But we do have a substantial subset of properties that we've got data for. And I'm actually going to do a blog post on this very soon. But the issue is that CTR has been in free fall for nearly 2 years. And the problem is that it's hard to segment anything from it, because at the same time traffic patterns are changing, Google is systematically pushing more and more AI overviews across a broader search. And at the same time as that, we're also seeing quite a lot of AIO instability, because AIOs are generated by Gemini, they change the model. And as we all know with AI models, they're constantly going through iterations. But from the data that I was looking at, the average drop in click rate for position 1 below an AIO now was down 40%. And the average click depth was down 70%. That means for all the people that would scroll down page 1, we're now seeing 70% less clicks in terms of distribution further down the page, which now means that, position, let's say 5, might have generated 100 clicks a month for a keyword 2 years ago. Now you're losing 70% of that. So now, to compensate, you need to be position 1, position 2. And AI overviews are, they are a nightmare to track. For all the tools that I've used to track them, they're not always overly accurate. The data that we've got is alarming in terms of how much click loss there is. But naturally, we don't see the same with impressions, because people are still searching the same amount. It just means the clicks are falling.
Yes, indeed. But that's the constant. So let's return back to you were saying anything about the importance of backlinks. We know that backlinks represent the A of authority in the AAT. This is maybe the only official statement Google gave back in the day about AAT and in relation to ranking factors, and was given by Gary Lees. And so you were saying, okay, even in also still in AI overview and AI mode, backlinks are very, very, if not the mediums of the backlinks, they are still so important. But do you think that the placement of the backlink, the context of where the backlink is put, and everything else are maybe playing more, have a more weight in AI search in Google than maybe they had before? We know that also for classic link building, classic suggestion recommendation was, okay, a good link should be in a thematically related website and in a context which is obviously related to the page that is going to be, to your page that is going to be linked. But sincerely, it was also working, to be honest, in not so precise condition, let's call it so. But now, because of the semantic nature of AI search, I think that a classic link building campaign must pay more attention than before, to this kind of, let's say, factors of the backlink. What is your opinion?
So I'd like to think that that's the case, but in my experience, it's not the case. I've done so many audits where I would export all of the domains, and then I would filter them by traffic. So we know Ahrefs is inundated with spam domains, and like hundreds of millions of sites globally have all these random spam links appear, anything from DR1 to DR80 with no traffic. What was interesting was that in so many cases when I would export links from Google Search Console, because remember years ago, I think it was Danny Sullivan was saying that GSC won't show all of the external link data, but it will show the best quality of links. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So in literally 9 out of 10 cases, if not more than that, I would export links from GSC, external links, and then I would marry that data up against Ahrefs metrics, and the amount of times that Google was reporting on just absolute garbage links as external links. So what I think is that Google's assessment criteria is focused more on the quality of content more than anything else. And what we're seeing now is actually a massive pivotal shift, because for years and years and years, the whole web, the whole point of the web is one site links to another, links to another. You have search engines crawling one site, crawling another. So links had to always be incentivized, because if you incentivize links, you're encouraging one site to link to another. And that's how Google built its index. Like, if sites didn't link, Google couldn't have built the index it has. So the incentive to link has been left alone, because fundamentally it's how stuff on the web becomes discoverable. But I think Google is not focusing on link assessments based on context or anything like that. And the reason that I believe that is because the amount of processing power that Google would have to use to make that distinction, they've probably got more than 100 billion pages indexed, right? And you imagine the amount of processing power. I mean, we knew for years that PageRank was just mathematically calculated. PageRank didn't distinguish between a good site or a bad site. You could have a good site with loads of bad links and still get good PageRank. I think that PageRank model persists as it was. How I think Google are playing it moving forwards in terms of backlinks is that rather than worry about the quality of the links between the pages, they are now making the distinction, do we need to index this page? Which is why we are seeing huge de-indexation going on at the minute. And it's easier for Google to say, look, is this page good or not? Is it going to add any value to our index? No. Okay, well, we won't index it. And then if it doesn't index it, obviously that PageRank link equity isn't distributed to anything beyond that page. So Google can solve the problem by just not indexing stuff that it doesn't value, as opposed to worrying about each specific relationship between page A and page B. And I've looked at so much link data over the years. There was never anything to suggest that our links should be, from relevant domains, or our links should be within content where the surrounding content around that has the same context. So it's relevant for the end user. And I think that distinction is more based on, look, we can see site A links to site B. Is site A any good? If the content is indexed on URLs on site A and it's linking to site B, PageRank will flow down. But Google won't add an algorithmic weight to say, well, that page is good and it links to that, but the content's irrelevant. That, to me, is too much for them. And we know, right? So the biggest thing that I always try when I'm doing like webinars or I'm doing training or teaching, I say to people, the way that you need to think about this is Google is a business. It has shareholders. It needs to make a profit. Now, for every single thing that Google does, it has to weigh up, does this thing cost us money? Do we make revenue from it? And we know that Google has got progressively more greedy. They're not even hiding it. In the past, they used to hide it. Now they don't care. They're being ruthless. So the way I like to see it is there a benefit to Google actually scrutinizing links, or using Gemini to scrutinize the content instead? Because then it can just be a relationship of good pages linked to good pages. The other one is that if, let's say, you go to Google and you type in is it limoncello in Italy?
Mm-hmm.
Limoncello recipe, right? How many limoncello recipes are there going to be? There might be 5, 10, 15 different ways you can make it or things that you can add. So why does Google need to keep 10,000 limoncello recipe
Yeah,
pages?
yes, this is the concept of commodity content. And in this case, just to even considering all the false positive, don't you think that retrospectively, so thinking back, this fight between brackets against commodity content also as a way to save cost for Google was what actually inside the now into the core algorithm, the concept of helpful content update, sold as you must create helpful content. When we saw how much disaster that kind of algorithm did, but wasn't there when Google started to fight commodity content in order to clean up its own intest.
Yeah. So I witnessed bloodbaths when it came to helpful content. I think the last thing behind helpful content that was anywhere close to it was Panda Penguin. CU was absolutely ruthless. The problem with helpful content is that people misunderstood what it was. People assumed that, oh, my content quality is good, and yet I got wiped out by HCU. But it wasn't about how good the content was. And this is the problem. So helpful content was a relationship between sheer brand authority, but user engagement. And we know that between Rank Brain and helpful content, they were accruing huge amounts of real world user behavior data because they had everything, didn't they? They had click through rates, they had Pogo, they had all of this data. So what they then did when helpful content come along was it's like, right, we've got this huge data set now, and as Google has gone on, more and more of its algorithm has become AI driven. But with helpful content, it was a mass purge. And one of the biggest things was that the web was being polluted with commodity content because everyone was doing it. Everyone was creating blogs, articles at scale. And the problem is that all of this content is being produced, huge amounts of content, billions of documents, and people aren't reading it. No one's using it. You know, I did so many
Or
audits.
even worse, and nobody can really distinguish if it is being, remember if it was written in a website or in another website.
Exactly. So what you would find is that Google then made the distinction, is this content actually being used? You know, because what used to happen, and this was like absolutely rife in the casino industry. The casino industry was like the prime industry for this, especially of affiliates. You would crawl an affiliate casino site and you would have 15, 20,000 words, long form articles. Okay. And then as soon as you got the GA4 data and you got some Microsoft Clarity data, you would just see time and time again, people engage with it 10, 20, 30, 40 seconds. People scroll down 5% of this huge article. So you think Google's getting all of this telemetry data and then it's working out, well, what's the point in serving all of this content? People don't read it. So helpful content was like, what are people engaging with? And this is the reason that UGC content did so well, because I remember it. I had clients come to me for an audit, right? And they've spent tens, hundreds of thousands of pounds writing amazing content. But what they didn't understand was that it wasn't about the content being amazing. It was how can anyone engage with it? So when we looked at stuff like Reddit, people are negatively biased.
Yes.
Like if I'm going to buy something, I want to read a review. I'm more likely to engage with the negative aspect of that review than the positive. Because if I'm going to buy a Google Pixel or a Xiaomi 14 or something like that, then I want to know, okay, well, has this phone actually got like any problems with it? And UGC, because it was raw, unfiltered, and unbiased, people tended to engage with that content more, which is why huge long form content not really getting any engagement got displaced heavily by Reddit threads, because you would go for a Reddit thread and people would be like giving their real world experience of having something or doing something. And that's where I coined the term good quality content isn't always helpful content, and helpful content isn't always good quality content. So that was Google's lever to start purging, all this content, because every page that gets indexed has a carbon footprint, because it costs money to fetch it, to render it. And the other thing that's really fascinating, so I came up with my own terminology and I called it first pass indexing. So what I noticed Google started to do was, in the past, Google would just index everything. Then down the line, it would make a distinction. Actually, this content isn't any good. We're not going to serve it. So they de-index it. And then I started noticing that they would crawl a document and then just not index it. And it would go straight to not indexed. We can see that Google is now purging things at scale. Like, I'm seeing it on LinkedIn. Loads of people are showing like index stuff going down. And the problem that we've got, and this is why when I see people saying, oh, AI content agents that go out and create content and post it to your website, and I'm just like, Google is systematically fighting this by just not indexing the content in the first place. So people have got this idea that they can mass produce content at scale with an agent or PSEO or something like that.
Yes. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's never been about maybe only in the very, very early years of searching, you could have thought in terms of quantity. But since when Panda, when Penguin, when the quality updates and when the core updates, whatever, it's never been about the quantity of content, but how well you choose what content must be created. And how well are able to make this content. There is a concept which is always coming up in the search raters guidelines, which is the concept of beneficial purpose, which is the very true concept for me behind the helpful content, for example, and behind the concept of quality content. So if a content is beneficial, which means that the response to the search intent, to the pain point, which maybe is just curiosity. It should not feel like I need to buy or I need to go. It's maybe just curiosity to know. But if you are creating that kind of content which is able to resolve this kind of beneficial purpose, and then you are, because you have done the job to study well your audience, you know how to make them engage, so to remain inside your website. So you are going to have those kind of, you call the DOG metrics, like the long click, the good click, and so on, because we know that after 13 months, Google will go and see, okay, these are the DOG metrics for this page. Are they shit? Yes, crawl, but not indexed. And I want to touch on one other thing, one last thing before finishing. We are recording this episode and we are just started more or less a week ago, a new Google core update. So when this episode is going to be live, which is going to be in about 2-3 weeks maximum, the core update supposedly is going to be ended. And probably we are in the week after the end of our Google update. So for the people who are listening and watching us, what are the first 4 things you always go look on a website when a core update like this, or any update, has ended it's a rollout? The things that Daniel never missed to check first.
So sorry. So phrase that again. So are you saying after a core update.
Yes,
What
after an update, like a core update, and you have to, okay, let's see what have been the effect on our website of this core update. What are the first things that you never, never skip to check first?
query counts. So I look at a domain's overall served query volume, because that to me is like the biggest indicator of, has the site been impacted, and is it a case of queries slip in position or they're lost. I do that because for so long people would have rank tracking, and they may add 100, 200, 300 keywords, and they would base their decision on ranking changes after a core update. What I tend to do is I tend to look at the overall weighting of a domain based on how many queries it's served for, primarily because it gives me a much clearer idea of, has the site been devalued, or has it seen any slippage, or, or is it stable? So query counting is the first thing that I look at. Then what I typically tend to do, if I see that there's been an impact, is I'll compare 30 days pre-update, 30 days post-update, and then I dump that query and page data and now run it through AI to tell me, okay, well, what queries were lost? What's the pattern in the data? So I can start understanding if there's a relevancy issue, if there's a spam or a trust issue. And then really the other things is, because I use AWR, I'll look at volatility as a whole. I look at page indexing to see, has there been any sudden change, in the volume of pages being indexed? Has there been anything like that? Those really are the key things that I'm looking at to see, do I need to worry? Do I need to make the client aware what's happening? Those are the main key things that I tend to look at.
Thank you. So let's forget for the last 5 minutes. Let's forget AI. Let's forget search, but maybe somehow related. And I want to ask you one thing about you. You
Yes.
have one agency, which is assertive, but then you have also another business, which is SEO out. And then you have the tool, and you are kind of person, because I had the lucky, the fortune to see you work, that is really digging deeper into any kind of project. And you spend so much time work. And you are, in this sense, you are a workaholic in somehow, an SEO workaholic. But this, and I'm asking this because you're very open about this thing, this led you to a deep, huge, gigantic burnout. And burnout is one of the things that maybe in this past year people start to talk about more, but it's something that is quite common in our industry. So for the people listening and watching to us, what kind of lesson did you have learned from that moment of your life?
So it's no secret. After August last year, some pretty severe things happened in my life. So from a young age, from the early 2000s, I would do 14 to 16 hours a day. So what happened is that I used to work for SEO agencies back in the early 2000s. So 2003, 2004, 2005. I was working at SEO agencies as an SEO executive, and I wanted to run my own agency. So I would work at the agency during the day, and then I would get home at night, and then I would stay up all night building the agency. I'd sleep for 3-4 hours. Then I'd go back to the agency the next morning. So for a long time, I sort of started this habit of being able to work day and night. So my average day would be 9, 10 o'clock in the morning till 7 in the evening. And then I was doing 11 o'clock at night till 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, what happened was that the agency started to grow, business started to pick up, and with it came the money. And the money was a side benefit. So when I set out to do it, it was because I absolutely loved SEO. Earning good money was a byproduct. Now, I did this all the way through the 2010s up until the 2020s. And I started to develop quite a lot of health problems. And then last year in August, I lost everything. So I can't go into too much detail, but everything that I had, I lost. My whole world fell to pieces, and I went to the darkest place I've ever been in my life. So, I lost my home, I lost everything, and I had done so much damage to my health. So the thing is that for a long period of time, the money was good. So the money got so good that I decided to start SEO Stack with that extra cash that was coming in. And the problem is that I went from doing 100% on one project to doing 30% on one, 30% on another, 30% on another. And whilst I did manage it, it was completely unsustainable. And I suffered burnout. I had a breakdown and I fell to pieces, and I lost 6 months where I struggled to work, and my whole life just crumbled. But I'm now rebuilding my life. I think sadly the burnout culture is going to get worse. And what I know people will be feeling right now, and I do know it, is that you've got people making a living, right? Now you've got people panicking because AI's taking this and taking that. And, all the news is how companies are laying off staff because they're bringing AI. So what you've got now is you've got mass uncertainty with, am I going to have my job in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months? You've got that uncertainty. Then on top of that, you've got the fact that it's nearly impossible to keep up with what's going on. Every 5 minutes, there's a new AI model. There's a new revision of this model. There's a new agent. There's these new skills on GitHub. There's all this huge amounts of stuff. And you've got people on social media and they're seeing this stuff on social media, how I built these agents that now run my business, blah, 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 all of this stuff. And you've got information overload coupled on top of worry, job security. And when you bring all of this, what it tends to make people do is, okay, well, what can I do? Like, how can I stay up to date? How can I make more money? And sadly, this is why so much of the garbage that we see on LinkedIn in terms of people that have a hidden agenda, how they revolutionize their business with AI agents, and then they get you to comment so they can send you it. And actually you just get pulled into a sales funnel where you have to pay for something. And I think the real danger with all of this is that it's creating a mental health epidemic, and more people now are more stressed than ever. And a huge volume of people have genuinely got concerns about their job security. Mm-hmm. So the danger is that it's very easy to get caught up in everything, and it doesn't lead to anywhere good. So if I could share any advice, it would be, yes, you can work hard, you can put your heart and soul into your work, but also consider the other things in your life away from work, prioritizing family, prioritizing health, prioritizing time to be a human and not just consuming all this content all the time and thinking, how am I going to do this and how am I going to do that? And all I see around me are people doing all this stuff with AI agents, and I haven't caught up, and how am I going to do it? And I think, we are living through exciting times, but I also think we're living through very stressful times, and, things go wrong for the best of us. And the reason that I share the stuff that I do on LinkedIn, I do realize some of it might not be appropriate for a business platform, but behind all the rants and the stuff that I do is a human. And I want people to be able to relate to me, because You know, it's better to have people that can relate to you rather than people that see you putting AI slop out there with no care in the world.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why when introducing you, I was underlining the fact that you are maybe, especially when you rant, sometimes also myself. I agree, or you can also not agree, but what cannot be denied is that you are an honest person. And this is maybe what makes value Daniel Foley Carter more than anything else. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you also for this last 5 minutes talking about your personal life. Very insightful for also for me, because I felt this kind of stress. In my case, was especially when COVID came out, because I had done the terrible mistake of mm, focusing and somehow specializing too much in one specific industry, travel, that was totally messed up by COVID. So imagine what was my level of stress in the first 3, 4 months during when COVID spread out. Thank you again, Daniel. It was a real pleasure to have you here at the third session. And let's say in the future, if something is changing in a positive or a negative way, maybe we are going to have a new episode with you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
And thank you to all of you, dear watcher, dear spectators and listener and whatsoever. Remember, let me do the YouTuber influencer thing. Remember to subscribe to the channel and to ring on the bell so you will be notified about new episode of the third session. Thank you and bye bye.